So after an episode last week which felt like it just fell a little flat and didn't do much in developing the story, episode 6 has just been released, and I think it's safe to say that this one definitely returned to the show's best form. With an epic fight scene which felt like it took up the entire second half. Well, it basically did in being 20 minutes long. An emotional ending, the revelation of a certain somebody not being on the side of New Age technologies. And wait, was that nearly holding a hand? Well, let's recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from this episode. Here is Reacher Season 2, Episode 6, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. What revelations were made in this episode? One of the main takeaways from this episode was the fact that Swan might not actually be working for New Age Technologies in the way that we thought that he was. When Reacher approached Marlo Burns, who was staying at her friend Chad's, she revealed all of the information that she had on the operation that New Age were doing, Project Little Wing. She grew suspicious of Project Little Wing after Tony Swan notified her of what he found, which then in turn caused her to get suspicious of Langston. After Neely and Dixon visited her at the headquarters, she worried that Langston may have grown to have seen her as a liability, so it caused her to go on the run in order to make sure that herself and her daughter were safe. Marlo revealed that she hired Swan because all of the security team at New Age were part of the same precinct and they were all buddy-buddy with each other, just as corrupt as one another. So she hired Swan so that there'd be some kind of differentiation there and almost a new pair of eyes. This was what caused the project to be on the cusp of being exposed. Swan noticed that the chips that were part of the Little Wing project were being flagged as defective, but were being passed through anyway in order to get the output to the number that they needed, to the number of 650, a number that seems to be everywhere in this season of Reacher. And from there, Swan reported the findings to Langston, which now most probably means that Langston would have grown suspicious of him, and Swan is most likely being held up somewhere, and being forced to cooperate with the promise of not ending up like his friend Franz, Orozco, and Sanchez. Hence why there were documents of him signing off on approval. I imagine this was probably done whilst he was being held hostage. However, I wouldn't trust a promise from Langston with much faith, so Swan's fate probably isn't looking good. We did actually predict that this could be the state that Swan could have been in during the previous video after episode 5, so it shows that Swan is out there and could still be alive. However, after the setup that was made and the fact that Langston barely escaped with his life, he may look to seek revenge on Reacher by killing Swan, knowing that he's a good friend of Reacher, so it would most definitely hit him where it hurt. But I think that's one for the next episode of the show. AM killing the officer. Is anybody else just getting a bit tired of this AM guy? I know there's supposed to be mystery around him, but I feel like we've had such a small amount of screen time with him that it's now just getting to the point where I don't really care that much. Plus, I'm also wondering why it's taking him so long to just get to the destination that he needs to get to. So far, we've only really had these small 1 minute, 2 minute sections where he kills somebody who's in front of him that looks like they're going to prevent him from moving forward. But, I mean, I don't know, it's just not really doing it for me. Within this episode, we saw that he killed the police officer who went to give him a warning, and he took the SD card which captured it, which meant that there was another murder tied to his name. And also over the radio, we heard the other officer reporting on the fact that the alias that he was working under, the doctor that he killed, had been reported. Later on in the episode, we heard that he needed to learn how to load the chips into the missiles and then operate them with ease before paying up to Langston. And this is something that I don't actually think will ever get done. It's something that I feel is going to take too much time for him. Considering there's only 2 episodes left of this season, I think we're going to see Reacher and the gang closing in on New Age most likely when AM is there, and we'll see himself and Langston facing off against Reacher. AM is a merciless killer and seems to be the same but also the opposite of Reacher. Highly skilled, but he has no morals, whereas Reacher doesn't just kill for killing's sake. So when the pair do finally come face to face with one another, it's going to be interesting to see just how close the fight is, because I'm imagining it's going to be a close one. Corruption is everywhere. One thing that this episode showed us is that corruption was present everywhere. We obviously saw that Langston and his crew were corrupt because they were former police officers. However, we also found out that Marsh, a police officer, was corrupt and was working with Langston and letting things slide. But we also found out as well in this episode in the flashback that Fields was corrupt, and he told Reacher to shut down the drug bust that the team had been working on. He wanted the project to be shut down because the colonel was going for a promotion and he'd been going after it for years, and if the bust were to happen it would look bad on him and ruin his chances at a promotion. So it showed that at every corner of Reacher's professional life there have always been dirty people, and people standing in the way of justice for their own personal gains. Even when we look back to Margrave in Season 1, the entire force was corrupt and on the payroll of somebody else. After watching the flashback, we heard that Reacher said that the last project that they all worked on turned to a complete mess, and he worried that this one would be the same. So I'm going to be guessing that in a flashback in a future episode that we're going to be seeing Reacher disobeying his orders and going along with the bust, which in turn will most likely be getting him dismissed. Overall review. I thought this was a good episode. I felt like after last week's episode, which fell a little flat, it returned to being the show that I truly know. The final half of the episode was really top tier and the stakes were so high with everything that was going on. I thought the shootout in the yard with Reacher against the three guys in Langston was great to watch. Seeing the same thing happen 3 times with each of the hitmen was just comedy gold, and we saw just how badass Reacher was. I thought he was going to get Langston, so it was a shame when he didn't, but I understand why. Having this intercut with Russo protecting Janie and being told was a great way of upping the tension and providing the suspense that I feel was definitely needed in that moment. I also thought the scene with Russo at the end was a great one too. We always knew that Russo wasn't a dodgy officer, and he was one of the only few that wasn't corrupt and easily influenced, because he cared about the badge, his father, the work that he did on the force, and the idea of being able to keep the streets safe and improve people's lives. So it was rather poetic that he died protecting the person that he was tasked with helping. In fact, we don't know if he actually died, but it did seem like he did. I did kind of feel like something bad was going to happen to him when we saw Reacher finally showing Russo some respect at the doorstep when he brought up the fight, and he said that he'd give him an advantage but then recognized that he wouldn't need one. So it was a nice moment for sure and a good way to round off the character arc if he doesn't return. I would say that this is probably my favorite episode of Season 2. I still don't think that the show is as good as Season 1, which is a shame. Season 1 for me was just top tier and it had me hooked completely. I don't know whether that was because the story was a bit more intimate and contained in one small place, but this one does just feel quite large scale and like it's sometimes hard to keep up with. But I'm giving it to the end of the season before passing my final judgment. With only 2 episodes to go, I'd say that Langston's time is running out, and he probably knows it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens as we draw ever closer to the season finale. So, there you have it. Reacher Season 2 Episode 6 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Reacher Season 2, then click on the card in the top corner. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.